If I were to tell you I'm a big fan of tea, I'm sure you'd have a pretty specific image of me. And I wouldn't blame you. The vast majority of the time, if the first thing someone tells you about themselves is tea-related, they're going to be a little too into tea. Me, though, I don't know. I'm not a tea guy. I just prefer the atmosphere of a tea house to a coffee shop. And for reasons I don't really want to discuss, I spend a lot of my time in places made for quick meals. I'm Rick, by the way. Another city, another sunset behind another small town skyline. Another bad taste in my mouth from another job. The monotony only broken up by stops like this. The place has character, especially for Who Gives a Shit Michigan. Tasteful rose paint and dark oak trim makes the tea house look like a rustic cottage. The windows are tinted and the interior warmly lit. I find myself a booth and take a seat on an overstuffed leather cushion. The table is immaculate, and the smell of fresh baked goods is thick enough it drowns out the lingering scent of gasoline and smoke from my nostrils. I predict beautiful tea and ugly prices, and when I'm brought a menu, I'm not disappointed. The waitress seemed to linger for a moment, expectant. I assume the place has a small circle of regulars and pay no mind. If I was a tea guy, I'd bore the hell out of you with a rant about the selection, but thankfully for you folks, I'm not the type to overshare. Bad for business. For those of you in the know, though, just a beautiful selection of Northern England's finest with a few blends I've never heard of from Holland. I decide to throw caution to the wind and order one of the Dutch blends with the vowel-ridden names and a watercress sandwich. Coffee is black sludge to keep you going. Tea is an experience. The dark, fragrant blend I'm brought brings to mind memories of early childhood mornings. Funny how smell works. I take my time, the brews and baked goods clearing my mind, letting me relax and focus on the next leg of my journey. But as caffeine tends to do, eventually nature called. The bathroom would have been at home in my grandmother's house. Soft pastel colors, clean white porcelain, and limitless knickknacks, sprays, and magazines. I turn off the polished brass faucet and turn to leave. I know something is wrong the second my hand touches the knob. No give at all. My suspicions are confirmed as I try to turn it, and it doesn't move a centimeter. I chuckle. I can't think of the last time a door was so much of an issue for me. The knob wasn't any model I've seen before, and the more I look, the more I don't like what I see. Fuck me, I mumble, looking for a set of hinges. I find none. I slam on the door, screaming, as obvious as the situation is becoming, it makes no sense. After 15 minutes of kicking and screaming, that should have alerted every hipster and old lady in the place. But there isn't so much as a knock from the other side of the door. Soundproof. Awesome, I say, inspecting the lavatory. Air duct under a decorative cover is grated, the grate welded to a plate in the ceiling. Any object of size is cleverly affixed to the floor with hidden bolts or welds. The small lamps are hardwired into the wall, which is industrial cement under its flower-printed wallpaper. This place was made to keep people. What is obvious? Why is immediately eating away at me? There are dozens of reasons someone may want to be in this kind of situation, but this place wasn't just made, and even if it was, no one is going to build a covert prison cell on the off chance I wandered in. That's comic book shit. They'd send some tweaker with a pawnshop pistol. The prospect that this is just something I stumbled into doesn't provide me much comfort. I've been around the block a few times, but something like this, it's well out of my wheelhouse. After a couple of hours, I noticed the silence, the pure, uncanny lack of noise. The place was nearly full when I came in, tea house or no. I should be hearing the sounds of commerce outside. If you're reading this or listening, you're likely the kind of person that doesn't have to ditch your phone much and probably asking why I wasn't calling 911. Unfortunately, my life has led me down a different path, and I find myself unfortunately between phones. Thankfully, I've always been partial to a wristwatch, so at least I can mark the passage of time. I assume I'm being recorded, and spend the first 24 hours talking to whoever may be listening. Dropping names, making offers, anything I can do to get some kind of response. Nothing. Fear and panic begin to set in on the second day. Hunger starts to tear at my stomach, and a sense of powerlessness and isolation sits in. By day 3, my body is cramped and aching, my sleep coming on a hard cement floor disguised as tile. My brain is fogged from lack of food and proper rest. My mouth tastes of the gritty tap water, and I realize no one's going to be looking for me. Had this been before a job, I could be guaranteed the client would come searching, looking to take their payment out of my ass. And with the types of folks that employ me, it'd likely have been within hours. But as is, a private person such as myself has no Deus ex machina on the way. Day 3 teaches me something about mints. The stale, clumped bowl sat on a small shelf at the bottom of the over-the-john cabinet. A thin layer of dust coated them, making me assume they were some form of decorative soap instead of ancient, likely turned pastel mints. I was desperate enough to eat them, figuring any calories would be better than none. Friends of mine in prison could have told me this was a bad idea. Toothpaste ulcers are a known thing. You see, mint, especially cheap menthol-based flavorings on an empty, let alone malnourished stomach, is just about the worst thing you can do. I enter day 4, puking blood and yellow bile. I wipe my mouth and stop dead on my trip to the low-pressure faucet to wash it out. Those mints, the same ones that burned through the remnants of my stomach lining, undisturbed layer of dust and all, were back. That was impossible. At no point was I asleep or anywhere more than a foot or two away from the bowl. I close my eyes, shake my head, and wash out my mouth, putting this bit of information on the back burner for now. Day 4. As I feel my tartar-coated teeth start to ache, I realize I need to make a plan. I start this by going over every inch of the bathroom again and trying to find any flaw or object I can use to make an escape. I keep my focus, thinking of the long conversation I'm going to have with whoever put me in this shitty Saw knockoff. I peel back every bit of wallpaper I can. I rummage through every cabinet. I claw and pry every surface where it is even a remote possibility. By the time I nearly collapse, my rapidly thinning form soaked in sweat, I found something. But the objects in question just confuse me further. A 1930s straight-style razor, yellow to pearl handle, a magazine from around the same time written in a Cyrillic language I can't even begin to guess at, a rusted old fountain pen, and a worn leather-bound journal. What made these things stand out were the small numbers hidden on each. The razor had a 1 etched into the back end of the blade, hidden by the handle. The magazine was issue number 2. The fountain pen had a year embossed on its oxidized surface, the only legible number being 3, and within a swirling, looping pattern burned into the leather of the journal, a 4 could be made out. My mind quickly concocts a scenario. Some idiot obsessed with escape rooms, maybe. I'm sure there's some obtuse way I'm intended to use these things to get myself out. That being said, I'm not the guy you want to piss off and give a razor to. At first, I latch on to this vicious truth as a torch against the dismal fatality of my situation, but then I begin to think about the mints. Someone had to replace them. That means someone has to have come in. I turn the blade in my hand, fear and anger turning my brain into a derailed train of revenge and uncertainty. I dump the mints into the toilet and flush, their long-since expired colors running the instant they touch the water, blending together and turning into an unhealthy brown. A few hours later, I feign sleep, my breathing low and shallow. waiting to hear the first footstep. I'm hurting, nowhere near full strength, but I almost pity whatever unlucky bastard walks through that door. I don't hear the click of the doorknob or the first footstep, but I feel a cold gust of air blow into the bathroom. It's strangely stale and dry, but I'm up in a flash, malnourished muscles screaming in protest, threatening to pull and cramp. He's a big guy, 230 at least, short but with a worker's build to him. He's standing between the door and the bathroom counter. I'd prefer to just run, but there's no way I'm getting out there without going through him. His brown suit is old, and his long, graying hair is greasy and matted. I grin as I grab his shoulder and spin him towards me. I slam the man up against the cement wall, a death grip on his oily-feeling suit. The razor is under his chin, but I see his face and I freeze. It's a twisted, sunken, funhouse mirror mockery of the human form. A leering, jowled, pig-eyed abomination. It stares at me. The hatred in those tiny orbs chills me to the bone. But I've been scared before. This guy can be a sideshow freak all he wants. He's still gonna bleed. I swipe the razor in an arc that should have left him clutching his ruined neck on the tile floor, but the blade passes through the man's body as if it were made of smoke. The laugh. It sounded like a chorus of dying rabbits, like human screams drawn from memory. I'm tossed like a toy into the far wall. I see out the door for the first time in days, and what is out there isn't the tea room. It looks more like a bedroom. The thing looms at the far end of the tiny room. With every passing second, shadows deepen, the air seems to take on a weight, and this creature, this ghost-like thing seems taller, more imposing. My heart is pumping too fast. I begin to see black spots along the edge of my vision, my nutrient-devoid blood doing its best to keep me going. Its rictus grin stretches. The spectre retrieves the razor from the floor, looking longingly at it. I push past the fear, get to my feet, maybe make a run to the door, but there's a burst of pain in my chest, broken ribs for sure. The pain and shock makes me fall flat on my face. I try desperately to get up, but I can't manage to do it. I feel grateful as the darkness overtakes my vision, knowing whatever this man or thing has planned for me, it's better I don't see it coming. I wake up to a headache brought on by hunger and dehydration. The bathroom is immaculate again, but the lights are lower, and there's a weight, a palpable sense of wrong in the air. And then I hear it. I can't. It's a thin voice, female, young. She says more, but no matter how hard I try to listen to the sourceless voice, I can't is all I can make out. It repeats at erratic intervals, seeming to come from random points in the room. I drink, but the tepid water sits like a rock in my stomach, and as I watch the thin trickle in the dim light, I notice its color is off, slightly rust-tinted. I attempt to use the toilet and find it no longer flushes. My grim laugh seems to echo in the tiny chamber. I have a hard time accepting something I'm sure you guys understood a few minutes ago. I try in any way I can to convince myself this is all smoke and mirrors, but the weight of being in the middle of some kind of supernatural clusterfuck smothers me. I search the bathroom again. Everything seems to be a little more worn, but everything seems to be the same, with the exception of the razor being missing. I hear a scratching inside of the sink cabinet, small and quick, like something wants to get out. I gag. Hot, acidic bile fills my mouth, and as I try to wash it out, I see a black, almost insect-like claw protruding from the faucet. It bends upwards, tapping along the brass, extending itself about 6 inches before retracting inward. I decide I'd rather taste puke. I know I can't have much time left. Every moment sends bolts of pain through me, and if I don't get these ribs patched up, there's a real chance of a punctured lung. Not to mention the fact that I'm going on nearly a week without food. If this is all random chaos, I'm screwed either way, but I try to press on with the only clue I have. I begin to flip through the magazine, trying to find any scrap of text I can read, I'd done this a dozen times already the day before, but I need something to keep my mind off the horrors that seem to be waiting just beyond every crevice and every shadow in this place. Then I see it. Something that wasn't there yesterday. An article in plain English, Poltergeist and Sacrifice, by a woman named Laura Sett. Poltergeist activity is often misconstrued as being caused by a particularly vengeful or evil spirit. While there are some similarities to a haunting, poltergeist activity has a different source, and therefore a different method of appeasement. Most often, a poltergeist manifestation is caused not by an individual, but by the combined spiritual weight of an event, a true case of the total being greater than the sum of its parts. The negative energy, individual souls, and history of the location, through as of yet unknown means, combine to create something more akin to a minor god than a powerful spirit. And as such, traditional methods of removal such as those offered by various religious and mystic organizations are ineffective. The only true way to keep a manifestation at bay is via a complicated form of sacrifice, often recreating key parts of the event that triggered the manifestation. Sacrifices can run the gamut from trivial to lethal, but as seen, repercussions of an unchecked manifestation will seldom be worth the cost. There was more to the article, but as I finished it, the lights began to flicker and dim, and the magazine began to crumble in my hands. "I can't eat." I hear the voice clearer now. I still can't make out all of what she's saying, but she sounds closer. The room is no longer silent. The scratching and tapping from the sink is more rapid, more purposeful. I can hear faint music outside of the room. An old phonograph, I think. The hellish orange strobe of the lights turns shadows into looming creatures. I can't tell what's starvation-induced hallucination and what's some kind of force I'll never understand. I'm rattled and unhinged. I scream at the girl to shut up, but of course she doesn't listen. I think about praying, but me and the guy upstairs haven't been on good terms in a long time. I see movement on the ceiling, I feel the humidity rise, and get the sense of something unstoppable starting to gain steam. My mind wants to think of nothing but the things in the shadows. I feel something thin and rubbery caress my cheek in a moment of darkness and force myself to think about the pen. In a eureka moment, I try to jam the nib into my arm, but it passes through, mockingly. But in the flashes of orange light, I see something. The corner of the counter is cracked and rotten now, caked with rust-colored half-congealed blood. Jagged splinters stick out like grasping fingers, and I laugh a sick chortle as I realize what I have to do. I slam my forearm into the serrated corner, screaming in pain, and the sound of an echo of my fraying sanity. The wood and steel tear a massive piece out of me, my starvation-thinned flesh splitting like an overripe pear. And for a moment, I see it. Just a flash. A trapped little girl, an evil old man, long before they became gears in this horror-producing machine. And when I snap out of it, the room is dark, the sound of formless things all around me. For a brief second or two, one of the lights produces a dim glow before going out. My left hand isn't working. Must have hit a tendon or nerve. I uncap the pen with my teeth, holding it under the torn limb. The blood seems to give the pen weight well beyond its few millimeters. "I can't eat. I need," the girl says. Her voice seems right next to me now. In another dim flash of a dying bulb, I see a twisted mass of clicking tendrils scraping my blood and flesh, greedily from the counter. I hear laughter, real, and followed with hot, reeking breath, I turn to see a leering, faceless grin, illuminated and formed out of the wall. The room feels more claustrophobic by the second. The things I can see in the sparse, dull orange flashes of light seem to focus on me. Tendrils, like heavy smoke, begin to wind around my leg. A hand, massive and not quite human, grasps my shoulder. I feel swarmed by things I can neither fathom nor see. I steady my breathing and wait. I know I'll have to write something, but what? The dull orange glow, like a dying candle gives the barest of light. I flip through the journal, seeing nothing but blank pages. I clench the pen in my teeth hard enough to crack one of my molars. The glow dies, and my heart sinks. But as I flip a page, I feel something, some indent. The hand pushes down on my shoulder as the tendrils begin pulling me towards the sink. I have no strength to fight. It's taking everything in me to keep conscious. I see the cavern of pitch black. I'm being dragged toward as the light pulses, the glow barely able to pierce the gloom. This place has turned into a senseless hellscape, but I can see it. I can trace the outline with my hand, as if someone has pressed too hard with a pen. I can see the indented words and begin to trace over them with the pen. I'm sorry. I have to roll over my damaged arm, tearing out a page and slipping it under the door. Something inside the limb snaps and I feel a deep pain shoot up to my elbow. For a moment, I'm sure I guessed wrong. My foot inches from the onyx-fanged maw the sink cabinet has become. But then the din of the hellscape switches off. I no longer feel the unholy press of whatever unnatural things were slipping from the cracks in reality. I'm standing in a void, still, calm as death. In every direction but one is nothing but endless nothing. The bathroom mirror floats, fixed in space. I feel myself drawn to it, in awe of it. I see the girl for the second time, and I'm overwhelmed with sadness. She's a flickering, pale thing. Her body is broken, the victim of the kind of violence the worst person I know wouldn't even think about. I can't eat. I need. I hear. The voice is soft this time, almost sweet. Of all the wounds on the girl, the one that stands out the most is her destroyed wreck of a mouth. I feel mad for her despite my situation. I hear her crying now, and the situation starts to come together. The starvation, the entrapment, the torture, they fit together like the combination to a safe. I see the forms of dozens of people to either side of her as she closes the distance. She's right in front of me now. When I can finally hear her clearly, it sounds different, like I'm hearing the recording of an event. I can't eat. I need teeth. I hear, as her dead eyes hold me in a trance. She raises one hand, the cold, dead flesh gently resting on my cheek. It passes through the cheek harmlessly, but as it makes contact with my teeth, I feel the worst pain I've experienced, a pain so severe as to overshadow the mind itself, a pain I wake up most nights to in a cold sweat thinking about to this day. She scoops them out like gutting a pumpkin. I can't beg or pull away. I can't even scream, even as each inch of movement has me internally begging for death. There isn't any blood, and in fact, if I didn't know any better, I wouldn't even know I ever had teeth. But as the apparition stages at them greedily, that's cold comfort. The girl walks away, and after a few paces, reality comes crashing back down around me. I'm on my side. My arm has stopped bleeding, but the flesh looks like melted wax, fused and bubbled. As the door opens, I have enough strength to stand, but I'm not sure how long it'll last. There's a half-dozen people outside of the door. In front of me is a well-kept man in his 50s, in what looks like his Sunday best. "Thank you," he says, handing me a comically small towel for the amount of filth and blood I'm covered in. I can do nothing more than glare at the group as I leave, holding on to the wall for support. I got out of that town and went dark for a while. mostly getting used to the lifestyle changes a week or so of malnutrition and torture has caused. But that brings me to why I decided to, pun intended, spill the tea here. I've got a question. Do I keep myself hidden and take this as a win and never look back? Or do I maybe try and get a little non-divine retribution? Don't know how possible that would be, but I guess that's where you all come in. Let me know what you think. A lot of posts here start with something like, "I've never really had any experience with the paranormal." Not the case here. In fact, I'd venture to say that the paranormal is standard for me. I'm a dark web streamer. Now, before you start calling the FBI, it's not what you're thinking. I don't torture people for some cult. I don't let some abomination hunt folks and take bets. I play games. It just so happens that the games I play usually have a bit of a disturbing backstory, and tend to, from time to time, break the laws of nature. The first question folks always ask is, "Isn't that dangerous?" The short answer is, yeah, but no more so than any number of science or gun channels on the clear web. Which is to say, as long as you have some real training and aren't a moron, you'll be fine. The long answer is that my family tree has some deep roots, and in addition to spending a couple $100,000 on essentially paranormal community college, I'm naturally inclined to luck when dealing with the supernatural. People like hunters, witches, warlocks, they all get the fame when it comes to supernatural nepotism, and with good cause. What they do is flashy, exciting, but there are a lot of folks out there who are just born with a jib cut in the way the things that go bump in the night like. Wouldn't let me go on a coffee date with the devil, but it avoids me becoming the main character in a Lovecraft novel while making some serious bank. Now, I'm gonna kill a lot of your buzz here. I've never played any of the big names. I mean, I know they're out there, but a guy's gotta know his limits. Though you'd be surprised at exactly how many cards, tapes, and floppy disks have been haunted, damned, or cursed. In fact, if you're a collector, you likely have one or two in your own home right now. Don't go starting up an NES bonfire just yet, though. The most common types are targeted, made to ruin a specific person or family's day or life. Unless you really go trying to stir up shit, you'll never see so much as a misplaced pixel. That's my job. I sit in my recording studio, the master bedroom of a small bungalow. I could probably afford to do an upgrade, but hey, I'm happy with what I've got. I curse as I try for the 10th time to edit out some visual errors that have nothing to do with the faulty data, and everything to do with a mass murder trapped in a copy of Oregon Trail. The software I use is designed for the task, but like most things involving the supernatural, it's more of an art than a science. You know what, Paul? You're gonna need to add another number to your tally, because you are killing me with this shit, I say to the ancient, blocky 486 in one corner of the room. There are some grinding, unnatural noises from deep within the machine. Right back at you. And for the record, if I knew you'd mellowed out over the last 40 years, probably wouldn't have bought you. I Need to Talk was real spooky until you started asking how the tigers were doing. Shit. Like always, they're tigers, I reply. Depending on your sense of humor, you're going to find the following fact either hilarious or depressing as hell. See, most folks that do bad enough things to be used as a supernatural alternator, well, they weren't doing so of their own free will. Whether it's simple mental illness or some kind of sinister compulsion, once they pass on, they're seeing and thinking clearly. No chemical imbalances as a spirit, and even the worst demonic forces have a hard time keeping their claws in ghosts. So often, what I get is less trapped psycho wanting to kill again, and more bored old person who hasn't talked to anyone in decades, or sad wanker unable to atone. But like all internet personalities, faking a vibe is easy enough, and the pasta is usually willing to cooperate for the odd favor and some company. If you're not that quick on the uptake, pasta is paranormal gamer slang. Obvious source refers to all of the various void-touched entertainment we have. For all of the occult electronics around me, the fact that my cell phone startles me when it rings is pretty ironic. The number is blocked, of course. "Hello?" I say tentatively. The voice on the other end is rough, not panicked, but stern. "Leave your house now," it says. I laugh. I've had fans or haters contact me before, and if you think the level of parasocial bullshit on YouTube is bad, add in some pseudo-religion and folks who fried their brains on interacting with the void, and it's not something to screw around with in my line of work. I'm gonna stop you right there. However you found my number, lose it. Whatever deep end you've just jumped off is going to get you into a world of shit. If you think I can amass an Olive Garden worth of pasta and not know a few people to take care of the cultists and psychos, you're really mistaken. My threat is somewhat empty. If this were to get to the point where my life was in danger, I've got a couple of favors, but it's not like I have a werewolf on speed dial for whenever I get spooked. I need to talk to you, urgently, and you're in immediate danger. The voice isn't pleading, but demanding. I chuckle. You're the second disappointing creep that said that to me today. Listen, if you want a commission or something, just send me an email. My prices are pretty clear. Otherwise, find someone else to be your Jodie Foster, okay? I hang up the phone. You catch that, Paul? And next time, go for that kind of thing. Be vague, kinda angry. I don't get paid. I can't afford to keep you guys. Let's work together here. The editing goes slow, but eventually I have a usable video. Would like to be able to stream it, but I had a feeling Paul might have been a bit of a wet firecracker. When I see the first tall, bald man wearing an outdated Adidas tracksuit, I don't bat an eyelash. I assume it's some pasta trying to grab my attention. Oh God, in a minute, I say, putting some finishing touches on my outro. Not that I knew it at the time, but what knocked 4 teeth out of my face and splattered my monitor with blood was a lead ball about the size of a chestnut, thrown by the now enraged man. I try to get my bearings, but I'm dazed. I stand, knocking over my chair. But before I can turn to face this Slavic-looking giant, he has me by the throat, pinned against a wall. Fear courses through my body like a fever. Reeking sweat begins to pour from me. I'm 5'5" and 145 pounds. And while my house is equipped to keep me safe from every type of pasta I own, I'm not much for mundane self-defense. 3 people enter the room behind them. One, I'm guessing the leader of whatever the hell this is about my size, but lean, corded with muscle. He's wearing a tactical vest, armed to the teeth, and stalking towards me with eyes full of violence. Behind him is a hefty Asian guy. Looks to be in his 40s. He's less armed, and a pistol is all I can make out. But I recognize some of the other items he's carrying, and get a sinking feeling of dread. The last member of this crew was an older woman. Unlike the psychotic vigor of the Takatool guy, or the nervous fidgeting of the Asian amateur alchemist, she seems almost aloof, immediately starting to sort through my collection of pasta and start putting some into a large duffel bag. The small man taps the dead-eyed goon on the shoulder, and he drops me to the ground. I struggle to breathe, struggle to keep calm. He kneels, putting his face inches from mine. His pupils are dilated. I'd call it Dutch courage, but I'm guessing the source is likely Bolivian. You want me to call you Mateo, or would you rather go by your channel name, Mexican Baseball? I want you to be comfortable here, as much as possible anyway." The short man pats the torn, bleeding side of my mouth. The spike of pain almost puts me to the ground. "You can call me Robin. You'll find out why in a bit." I'm too scared to spit out the shards of bone and gum. I swallow them and almost vomit before speaking. "Call me Matt," I say, unable to look the man in the eye. "I've got lots and lots of money. I get where this is going, but you don't want a random selection of pasta. It's dangerous. And unless your buddy there with the wish exorcism supplies is a lot more trained than he seems, you guys are doing nothing other than signing your own death certificate." Robin grins and looks up to the giant. "Yuri, I just got threatened," he says smugly. Before I can say that wasn't my intention, the large man kicks me in the chest. I hit the ground as if I was thrown. As I stare at the ceiling trying to get my bearings, Robin sits on my chest, leering down at me. "No, Eric isn't. But that's where you come in, Matty. You see, you've got the wrong impression here. You think this is about money, or maybe some kind of cult horse shit. And of course you'd think that. It's all people like you know. But me? I'm not some greedy asshole like you. And I gave up religion long ago. I'm a social worker. An angry one. And do you want to know what makes me angry, Matt? What really pisses me off? The fact that the supernatural exists. I know that's a little broad, but give me a moment. I'm not some kind of anti-void skinhead or anything. What pisses me off is that right under society's nose, there is another entire realm of untapped resources. But like always, with wealth comes disparity. People like yourself hoard this shit. And what do you do with it?" I assume Robin's question is rhetorical. I was wrong. I couldn't name the small, pointed metal device he hits me with. Some cousin of brass knuckles, I assume. Robin's blow splits my forehead open, and stinging blood runs into my eyes. "You don't know what you do with it, Matt? Let me educate you. Instead of finding some way to harness all of this for the good of the world, you stream. You use a connection to a rule-breaking source of power to make 3/4 as much as a family doctor." Rage, pure and focus radiates from Robin's face. "There are plenty of scum like you, little trinket peddlers and fame seekers, and in the entirety of recorded history, none of you have done the right thing." In a flash, Robin stands, and before I can try and get my bearings and run, Yuri is picking me up, sitting me in my editing chair. You have no idea how scary duct tape can sound. After a few minutes, I'm held helpless in the chair, hopelessly affixed with not one, but 2 full rolls. If you don't know what you're doing, these things do nothing. Or terrible shit. The reason no one uses him to cure cancer or solve world hunger is they can't. I plead, trying to skirt the line between direct and rude. It's only Robin, Yuri, and myself in the room. I hear the other 2 rummaging through other rooms. "So you say, but I have no intent on doing a smash and grab and taking my chances. My friends know enough. And you, Matt, you can tell us the rest." Robin ends this statement with a wicked grin. "No problem," I say simply. At this point, if these idiots want to play Russian roulette with the paranormal, let them. "Didn't think there would be. But here's the part you're not gonna like. I don't want there to be any funny business, and try as I might, I've only got one idea as to how to make that happen. Understand, Matt, tonight isn't, if you fuck me over, I'm gonna hurt you. No, tonight, Matty boy, there's no way you make it out whole. The only question is, how many pieces wind up on the literal cut-in room floor? I know something terrible is coming as Robin finishes his sentence. The room is silent, only the vague noises of searching from elsewhere in the house. Seconds stretch out like drops of molten glass. Not right this second, Robin says, shaking his head and laughing. His two companions enter the room, a large bag filled with discs, cartridges, CDs, and handheld devices in tow. They empty them on the floor, and my immediate reaction is there's no rhyme or reason to them. Like what someone who knew nothing of cars would bring back from AutoZone to fix an engine. Except for one. A deep crimson LCD handheld console. On the back, gauged into the plastic as if by a knife or maybe a claw, are the words Mr. Game. That's not good. That's something I regretted buying about a week after doing so, and have spent about 2 years trying to find somewhere safe to dispose of it. And the first question of the night, which one of these screws with electricity? Screws with electricity? What are you talking about? My reaction is maybe too genuine. The fact this guy has no idea what he's talking about means his expectations are going to be unattainable. My heart races as I realize how bad this is for me. He looks up to Eric. What do you say? Eric is unsure of himself, but Robin doesn't pick up on it. One of those doesn't need power. I just don't know which one. I understand Eric isn't mistaken. He's lying. Whatever street cred he convinced his boss of, he doesn't have. Not to say there isn't any unpowered pasta. Unplugging the system and it keeps going on is like trope number 1. I just don't own any. I've heard brutality, both literally and secondhand from some of the more talkative pasta. I've seen it, everything from crystal clear moving images no film could hope to reproduce, to haunting 8-bit renditions of real atrocities, but I've never experienced it. That changed. A sap is a leather pouch filled with lead shot. When used correctly, it can generally knock someone out without causing permanent damage. Yuri doesn't use it correctly. The black, almost purse-looking object strikes my hand, and I'm hit with a wave of pain so intense, so pure, I vomit immediately. A moment later, I realize that was just the beginning. That's what internal amputation feels like. 2 or 3 fingers, I'm guessing. You know the bad thing about torture, you can't ask the same question twice, because the second answer is always going to be what you wanted to hear. Which one can create something? Robin's cool, entertained demeanor shakes me harder than any brush with the other side has. My hand is starting to swell, pressure building between the tightly wrapped tape and arm of my editing chair. It takes me a few tries before I can speak. They don't. None of what I have does. I think of lying, but give the man the truth, trying to get this over as quickly as possible. He looks to Eric for an answer. Eric briefly makes eye contact with me. He's right, I think, the imitation relic hunter says. I think isn't a really definitive answer, Robin replies. He motions to Yuri. The man takes one step towards me before my addled mind makes a connection. The golden eye card, the gold one. First time you turn it on, it makes this 2000s tween-ish smorgasbord surge pizza rolls. That kind of crap. I breathe slightly easier as Yuri stops. See? Surprising how much help you can be when you're motivated. Yuri, take an ear, Robin says, as the older woman stows the game. Trauma and pain are intertwined. sometimes so much so that we forget that pain isn't always the worst part of injury. Losing an ear with a sharp blade isn't fun, but it's a very brief burst of sharp pain. Seeing a walking brick of a man dangle this ear in front of your face is something that breaks you. I spend the next hour poorly answering questions that make no sense, losing fingernails, patches of skin, and being beaten to the point where I couldn't feel the individual blows. I find myself helpless, pathetic. I catch glimpses of my battered body in the reflective ancient monitors and I'm horrified. I don't know how I'm going to survive. Now, for the million-dollar question, what has all of this been leading up to? Which one of these things is the most destructive? Robin asks the question I've been dreading. That one, I say, my mind broken long past a point of resistance, but still trying to avoid disaster. The red one, I say, attempting to gesture with my head. There are 4 red ones. Which is it? Robin's tone is short. I make a decision then that fills me with pride. I'd rather let them do their worst and say it out loud. That thing, the supernatural equivalent of a damaged grenade, needs someone to say it. Eric chooses this point to show that he has a little knowledge. As everyone knows, that is a very dangerous thing. I think he means the Mr. Game. The con artist's blunder is immediately obvious. Every light in my home shuts off. Even the incessant whirring and beeping of the pasta is silenced. The only illumination coming from the black and red LCD screen. It displays simple text, taunting salvation. Quit game. Yes or no? Robin seems elated, in an almost religious state of awe. Eric looks out the door and starts walking backwards, his face blanched. We need to get out of here, he says. What enters the room is an eyeball-straining, vaguely human horror. A man-shaped mass of shifting pitch black and digital-looking red lines. His laugh is digitized chaos, and with a flick of his hand, every screen in the room is filled with the almost dripping-looking red and black lines. I try to tell someone to turn off the game, but my voice is drowned out by the hellish static now screaming from every speaker. The solution is so simple, but nearly impossible at the moment. Eric starts trying to shout something over the din. The bits I catch sound Hebrew. He gestures towards Mr. Game, dramatic flourishes of his hands. Now, I don't know if spells are an actual thing, but I can tell you either way, Eric ain't no wizard. Mr. Game thrusts a claw-like hand at Eric. The man sees death coming and closes his eyes, but the blow never lands. Long seconds pass before the Asian man has the courage to open them again. Once he does, dozens of clawed hands and pixelated claws snake out of each of the monitors. It isn't a quick death. Each takes a handful or so of flesh before retracting back into their digital hellscape, and turning Eric into a dying, flints body over the course of about 30 seconds. I knock my chair over and try to inch towards the handheld. 1 foot bare, with all of the toes broken into swollen lumps, pushes me inch by agonizing inch. Robin is a lunatic calm. Yuri is stoic, but even his dead shark's eyes show a deep fear. I notice I never caught the woman's name as she attempts to rush past the entity. If she'd asked, I'd have been able to tell her, with something like Mr. Game, space isn't really an issue. He isn't just the form in front of us. He's a force that has taken over this area. She makes it out the editing room door. We hear footsteps on my stairs, then silence. The noises were horrific. If I were to be nice, I'd just describe them as eating noises. But that wasn't it. It was more like a garbage disposal that enjoyed its job. For a moment, we see a harsh, pixelated version of the woman's face display on the monitors. before fading back into the black and red static. I'm inches away from the handheld, my already mangled toes twisted into every angle but true. Mr. Game appears to grow, his static form spreading through the room as he glides towards Yuri, Robin, and myself. I slam my torn and skinned forehead into the system, nothing but a blinding burst of pain that threatens to make me pass out. I miss entirely again as my abused neck muscles scream in pain. The third, though, like a light switch, turns the impromptu horror film off. Robin is laughing, giddy, energized by this display of supernatural force. I can see the concern on Yuri's face, but either he's being paid well or scared of the small man. The little psycho flips my chair up, sending fresh pain through every part of my abused body. Didn't I tell you this guy would be useful, Yuri? Oh, the shit I am gonna cause with this thing. Matty boy, this is the kind of thing that will make people listen. This is the kind of thing that will give a voice to the voiceless. We're gonna make history, kid. As soon as I make sure you aren't gonna pull a runner on us. Robin slowly pulls a long combat knife from his vest. The tip pierces the skin just behind my knee. My eyes are wild with shock, my brain a mess of fear and trauma. Then a voice. Not one I've heard much, but a familiar voice nonetheless. It's low, harsh, and angry, with just a hint of a speech impediment. Which one of you guys is Mateo? The owner of the voice enters the room. He looks to be in his late 30s, 6 foot tall and built like a boxer. He wears dress pants and a short-sleeved black dress shirt. A gray suit jacket is draped over one arm. Robin looks shocked but confident, a hand on an oversized pistol in his tactical vest. Me, I say, having no idea who this guy is, but knowing his plans for me can't be any worse than Robin's. And all of the Ghostbusters from Nintendo games horseshit is over? The man stalks into the room, as if he isn't outnumbered and outgunned. Yes? I say, confused. The man grins, revealing a mouthful of shining silver teeth. Well, Matt, I'm Rick, and I'm your new best friend. From under the gray coat, a massive explosion happens, tearing the garment to shreds. Rick throws it aside and is holding a large black revolver. Bits of steel and plastic spray from Robin's tactical vest, and he hits the ground screaming. That's gut shot, and considering your stupid ass didn't have a plate in that plate carrier, there are all parts of your little army surplus toys in your intestines. Rick kicks the downed lunatic as he speaks. Yuri hesitated, but not long enough to get the gun from Rick. The massive pistol gets thrown across the room. The fight is mere feet from me, and while I can't say there was any kind of technical grace to it, it was clear both of these men knew what they were doing. As the blows land, I notice one of Rick's arms is covered in layers of mottled, ugly scars. Knives come out, and I find myself craning my neck to avoid backhanded slashes. My heart races, knowing the outcome of this fight determines my fate. Both men are tired, cut in dozens of places. The Russian smiles, pulling on reserves of strength. My heart sinks as Rick waves his hand in submission. I'm done. This kid isn't worth my life, and I'm sure that lunatic that hired you isn't worth yours. Rick says. Screw you, Yuri says simply. How much screw you does 100K get rid of? Rick retorts. Most, but I don't take checks, little man. Yuri's statement creates a thick tension in the air. Slowly, calmly, Rick reaches into a pants pocket, pulling out a set of keys, tossing them to the bleeding bruiser. That car's about 80K. There's another 40K in the trunk. We square? Rick says, sounding like he does these things daily. If I go out there in a salada, you won't make it out of the house. Yuri replies, shoulder-checking Rick as he walks by. I start to ask Rick a question, and he holds one finger up, silencing me. Wait for it, he says, as I wonder what I'm waiting for. The explosion shook the house, lighting fire to my front porch. Oh my Christ, I needed that. Stupid bastard. So, Matt. Rick walks over to me as he speaks, expertly cutting me free from the chair. I've got some ghost-related problems, and you were the only person I could find for the amount of money I had to spend. Bit of a dick move to ask for a favor after helping you out like this, but that's where I'm at, kid. If it helps, this place is gonna be crawling with the Russian mob, and whoever the hell that little fellow was attached to really quick. Help me out, though, and I'll make sure that ain't a problem for you. Rick's offer seems to be a lifeline, but it could just as easily be a fire to my frying pan. 20 minutes later, we're getting into a car that is most certainly not worth $80K, as my house was engulfed in some flames that were expertly prodded along by the mysterious man driving me. I told the guy I'd help him, but to be honest, I'm just as likely to take off the first chance I get. That being said, I wouldn't be posting here unless I needed advice. What do you guys think? Do I owe this guy anything? Do any of you know who he might be? What am I getting into? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm at a loss. If I were to describe myself in one word, it'd have to be stuff. I love to collect things, and while I wouldn't go as far as to say I'm a hoarder, I could see how anyone coming over to my place might assume that. While I do a lot of business on eBay and Amazon, my forte is good old physical auctions. Believe it or not, they're still a thing. Chances are you have a couple in your city or town. I buy, I sell, I keep more than I should. And while I can honestly say between transportation and packaging things for shipping, I'm making around minimum wage. The odd nice find here and there makes the 16-hour days worth it. Sometimes. My house is a bungalow, 2 floors, no basement, and while you won't find any dust or cobwebs, you'd be hard-pressed to come across much free counter or floor space. I have no particular type of thing I like to hold on to, just items that catch my interest. Odd pieces of history or pop culture that stand out a little, or have a charming backstory. Which brings me to an important part of my life. Recalls. One of the unforeseen hazards of dealing in objects that are decades old are the safety standards of the past. Sometimes things are obvious. Science sets with gunpowder and white phosphorus, lead tankers, asbestos stuffed toys, and the like. But others you might not think about. Radioactive paint is a thing. Certain types of plastic are nasty carcinogens after a few years, and even if you never intend on eating it, various types of canned food have health hazards that'd have you living in the hospital for a few months. Just to name a few. Which is why people like myself have a list of contacts for when one of us finds an old recall. Once the statute of limitations runs out, companies have little need to reach out to folks, so, like usual, a community effort is needed. My cell rings. It's a fairly old Nokia brick. I'm not some quirky technophobe. I have a brand new Samsung for personal use, but when I'm hauling cabinets and ancient sewing machines, I prefer something that can take a beating and be replaced without cost. Hello, Oxford Jones Collectibles and Junk Removal, I say. It's 9 p.m., and while technically business hours are over, I get later requests to haul stuff. There's no immediate answer, but I hear a lot of background noise. It's distorted, garbled, and chaotic. I guess I've been butt-dialed. Anyone? I say, getting ready to disconnect. Hello, Mr. Jones. This is a courtesy call from M-Tech Holdings in regards to a product you may have recently come into possession of. The voice is level, professional, and sounds female. I chuckle. Sorry, but that doesn't really narrow it down with me. You're going to have to be a bit more specific, I say good-naturedly. I find it odd that I'm getting a call directly from a company, but it's happened before. Usually, just when the statute of limitations is running out, they do a blitz to tie up any loose crates of lead-lined Shrek glasses or intestine-destroying butter substitute. The object in question would be a 1960s-era iron, frayed cord near the base and slight maroon tint to the metal, the voice says. I do remember the iron, and picked it up for next to nothing and was meaning to replace the cord and shop it around a few interested parties. Right, so what kind of hazard are we talking? I asked, rummaging through a closet trying to find the offending houseware. Mr. Jones, are you still in possession of the object? The voice says, annoyed. I pull it out and place it on the table, trying to think of what danger it could pose. Yep, sitting on the living room table right now. So, what should I be worried about? As I talk, I swear I hear a growl in the background of the phone call, but the quality is bad enough as it is. It could have just as easily been a chair being dragged. We will need you to complete a series of disposal instructions, starting with a few questions. Do you understand, Mr. Jones? The voice says, ignoring my question. All of this seems off. Her tone, her requests, the time, even the age of the product. If this thing has anything wrong with it, no lawyer on earth is going to try and sue 60 years after its production. Wait a second. What do you mean, disposal instructions? I say, somewhat standoffish. Exactly what the words I have chosen would indicate. Instructions for the item's disposal. Do you understand what is required, Mr. Jones? There's an edge to the woman's voice. I understand you haven't told me one thing about this iron, and that you feel the need to talk down to me. I don't know what your deal is, but if you expect me to foot the bill for this thing's destruction, not gonna happen. My rant begins to gain some steam as the voice cuts me off. There's real anger in it, the professional tone barely masking the rage. You're being uncooperative, Mr. Oxford, and M-Tech requires cooperation. I hang the phone up before I tell the lady off, assuming scam, prank, or simple idiocy. Within minutes, it begins to ring again. Same number. I turn off the ringer and let the woman on the other end waste her time. I sit down in an old recliner and reach for my remote, and my blood runs cold. If this had been my personal phone, I could think of a million technological ways someone could have pulled this off. But the brick, there's no real way to hack into it. It's 2 steps away from a rotary phone, for heaven's sake. Mr. Jones, pick up the phone. This is a time-sensitive issue. My phone is on, projecting the woman's voice. Her tone is unlevel as she continues. This is your first warning in regards to being uncooperative. Further incidents will lead to corrective measures. The way she says this, half condescending, half giddy, chills me to the bone. I pick up the phone and pull out my Swiss Army knife, unscrewing the back, thinking to remove the battery, and call the police on my personal phone. Oxford, the voice growls. I swear I hear it snapping jaws for a second. Once you take out that battery and we keep talking, you are going to begin to panic, which will make these tasks all the more difficult. Work with me. If you need incentive... A quick, sharp tapping on the glass of my front door. At first, I tell myself it must be a branch, or an errant piece of trash in an updraft, but it begins to get louder, more rapid, until I hear a pane give way with an almost musical shattering. "Stop!" I scream. The door is blocked by a small wall, but I eye the area wide-eyed as my heart starts racing. Whatever's going on, whoever is on the other end of the phone has someone here. I don't buy this implied spooky crap, but just because someone is lying doesn't mean they aren't dangerous. Some kind of rustling at the front door, or maybe not. Maybe it's just my overworked brain trying to make sense of the rapidly devolving situation. I'll take that as you accepting the current situation we find ourselves in. Answer the following questions truthfully to the best of your knowledge. Do you meet people in your dreams? The voice is calming now, though the question confuses me. I don't think so. Do you remember 1934? The voice says. No, I wasn't born, I say. The short, angry sigh I get as a response makes me look to the doorway. Do you check your doors? Comes the next bizarre question. Sometimes, a lot, I guess. Last question. Where is he? There is something to this last question. I feel strange, lightheaded, and for half a second I see it. Upstairs, I say breathlessly. A tall, dark form shrouded in shadow, barely tethered to reality. I don't know who he is, but I know where he is. The room gets cold. There's a sense of weight in the air, a dusty scent that reminds me of funeral homes and old cars wafts through the dining area. The iron seems to have a pull, some kind of aura to it. I hear whispers, many high-pitched and wailing, and one deep, dark growl periodically drowning them out. I shake my head and try to focus as the voice begins to talk again. You saw him? The voice says, its tone smug. Yeah, I did. What was that? I say, shaking my head, trying to clear out the disconnected feeling that is permeating my thoughts. That was the danger. What we need to determine is how potent it may still be. I assume you have salt and some form of hard liquor? I can barely hear the voice. Whatever is going on in the background of where she is has reached a fevered pitch. A digitized, garbled din that sounds like the world's largest bar fight, or maybe the world's smallest war. Salt, I think so, but I don't really drink. Why the hell would I need booze? I'm rummaging through my kitchen, the ancient box of salt, fairly new in comparison to my collection of junk. Jars and bottles hit the ground as I scramble to find some kind of booze. Things are changing. I can't quite put my finger on it, but shadows seem deeper. I feel a sense of being watched, and throughout my home, I hear a slight rattling and clinking, as if my collection of knickknacks and half-finished projects has developed a severe case of anxiety. Alcohol has been used in every religious practice since the animist gods. Stupid questions risk your safety, Mr. Jones. I hear from the brick as I pull something out of the back of my freezer that might do the trick. It's old, but sealed. I don't know much about rye, nor anything about how it may have been manufactured for a tie in the film Strange brew, but I don't have any other options. The bottle of rye will do, the voice says. I freeze. Even as my home begins to twist and warp into a nightmare, this statement chills my blood. She's watching me somehow. Pour the salt over the iron, she says pointedly. There's a smirk in her tone. As I slowly walk to the dining room table, pipes begin to shrink and rattle in an infernal chorus. I begin to follow her directions, and I'm enthralled by what I see. In the middle of this nightmare, it's a singular point of strange beauty. The white powder never touches the iron, a centimeter or two away. It falls to one side or the other. Gravity has nothing to do with this phenomenon. the grains falling randomly and forcing an unnatural spiderweb like a Mandela pattern. I don't remember doing so, but as I put the phone down, the voice is saying something. But it seems far away. The salt squirms and contracts on the table, with the smell of sulfur and burning slag. It begins smoking and turns a deep angry red. It burns a symbol into the table, a smoking, reeking brand. Then I see him, not in my mind, not as some flash of insight from beyond, but looming in the staircase feet from me. I've never seen a ghost, and in fact, I've never been one to believe in them. But the dark, shadow-laden form in front of me couldn't be anything else. Its presence extends beyond its form. I can feel its will, its anger from where I stand. Things about it start to change, and text becomes eldritch writing on rows of books, mirrors blacken and crack. Military rations, their seals rated for nuclear war, bulge and spill their contents. I'll call it man-shaped, the shadows around it cloak-like, drawing in the light around them. But the worst part was its eyes. At first I think they're just blue, but as I'm drawn into those scowling windows to a soul, I don't want to see it. I notice it. They aren't blue. They're like small windows behind which is a blue sky, broken only by white wisps of cloud. It glides soundlessly and stands inches in front of me. The voice is screaming, but I can't hear. I'm in the presence of something old, powerful, and nefarious. It places a hand on my face, and I feel a cold sting, smell copper and loam, and then I see it. The spirit doesn't talk. It gives me its story in a confusing, crashing, brutal flash of violent imagery and overwhelming emotion. I see a desert, a town isolated and backward, a mortician, a feud, and a night of brutal violence that left one man on the run and a half a dozen families missing children. I see the mortician living a life of horror and debauchery, leaving a trail of the innocent littering locations from the gold rush to the fields of World War I. I see dark things. Eaters of souls and joy take notice of the man, and when nature finally ran its course, and his shriveled black soul finally made the trip to the thereafter, they gave him a second life, armed with the power to enact his dark will. The spirit picked a week in October before All Hallows Eve to wreak havoc, culminating in a worldwide spree on the night itself. Flitting from country to country on the winds of the void, taking lives by the hundred but spreading it out enough, only those looking for these kinds of things to notice. It took 40 years, but groups of those that shine lights in the darkness found the ghost. They couldn't manage to destroy the creature. It had amassed too much favor with the things beyond, but they were able to trap it. I come to, shivering hard enough I spit out pieces of tooth and blood. I wipe sweat from my face and my hand is stained a rusty crimson, twin tear tracks of blood streaming thinly from my eyes. My mind still isn't quite my own, but I have enough sense to grab the bottle. I hold it in front of me like a talisman. I feel the mortician trying to worm its way into my mind. The voice is screaming as I fruitlessly try and ward it off with the bottle.
"Drink it,"
I hear her say through the din of children's voices and growling rage. It feels like something is trying to stop me. My muscles strain as I break the yellowed plastic seal. Liquor hits the ground as my hand shakes. The booze sizzles like fat on an overheated pan. I manage to take a gulp of the liquid. It's fouled by age and burns like poison, but as I feel its rotten burn in my stomach, the image of the mortician starts to fade and dissolve. Not enough that I don't feel it in the home, nor did the rot gut have any effect on the house itself, but I at least feel in control of my own actions. As I hear the voice, I realize that at this moment, that still might be a relative term.
"Mr. Jones, are you able to reply?"
She screams. Yeah, I say, picking up the old brick phone. That thing, it's getting in my head.
And unfortunately, that will continue to get worse until the situation is resolved. We'll be guiding you through a series of steps in order to disrupt the medium the entity resides in. Done correctly, this will neutralize it as a hazard.
The more I listen to the voice, the more I pick up odd little quirks in tone and cadence. Like she isn't quite fluent, but emulating speech extremely well. Why couldn't they have done this 40 years ago? I snap. The far and the sense of impending doom from every angle, more than I can take. There's long silence as shadows spread out like infected veins and begin to turn into black cracks. At first, the voice starts to giggle. It's high energy and carries a sick sense of amusement to it. She calms herself down before speaking.
Because, Mr. Jones, they wanted to survive. They cared about the effect it would have on the surrounding people. Neither of those are things I give a shit about, Mr. Jones. My directive is simple. Attempt to dispose of the hazard. I want you to survive insofar as I need someone to tell me if things worked. But still, chances are, you won't come out the other end of this. And that being said, you've now put yourself in Mortician's crosshairs. If it has its way, death will be nowhere near the end of your suffering.
I see someone out of the corner of my eye, beginning to walk behind me. I turn to watch, and I realize the person I'm seeing is me. Whether illusion, hallucination, or something more esoteric, something that looks and moves exactly like me walks through the dining room into the shadowed pit of the living room, and as if to rub in its reality, sits down and turns on the television.
Ignore it. Things are in motion you have no understanding of, Mr. Jones.
The voice begins.
We need to bring the spirit out of the ether. Draw a bath and bring a candle.
I'm past the point of questioning, find a long tapered red candle, and sprint upstairs to my bathroom. I notice that as I get away from the living room, the gloom and horror infesting the house seems to let up, as if the iron is ground zero of a slow paranormal detonation. I hear the scraping, whispering chorus from the first floor, but take a moment to breathe. The atmosphere in the bathroom feels less contaminated, less toxic.
Turn the lights off, get in the tub, run the bath, and set the phone nearby. You could disrobe, but I wouldn't suggest it.
The voice says. I do as asked. The water comes out freezing, regardless of my efforts otherwise. The rushing of the water turns into an almost soothing background noise.
Some things men are not meant to know, Mr. Jones. So much so that the universe will twist and bend to try and strip them of their knowledge.
As the voice starts, I can hear a harsh chanting. I focus on her speech, but it feels like those rhythmic words are telling secrets.
The true nature of reality, the soul, the things that call themselves gods, just a passing mote of understanding, just one ancient syllable in a dead tongue is all it takes.
The water starts to feel like it has a current. I reach out to the side of the tub and feel nothing but air. The chanting from the phone almost drowns out the voice. The room is pitch black, and suddenly it feels cavernous. The sound of the voice and the chorus of the damned behind her the only tether I have to Euclidean reality.
Do you understand, Mr. Jones? Can you parse the song?
She screams. The chanting echoes like cannon fire. I think I've already failed, but for a brief moment, I hear it. A word I refuse to print here. A single word that made things much too clear.
Light the candle,
the voice demands, and I act. As I reach out, I don't feel the cold edge of the tub, or even the fabric toilet seat cover, but I do feel the candle and lighter, seemingly floating in a void. My wet hands make the knockoff light struggle, the damp flint barely able to make a spark. But it does, and in the pitiful light of the flame, then the light of the candle, I see a sea of faces. Young, mutilated, sad faces.
Drop it in the water,
she says. and as if I had a choice, I obey. The candle sinks, its flame staying alight as it begins to fall. I watch it, a tiny pinprick of light. Drifting well past where the tub should end, it sinks for what looks like hundreds of feet, as the cold and sense of immensity makes me shudder uncontrollably. It rises from the depths, eyes sky blue, motes of white passing through them. It seems to draw the water and shadow up into itself as it rises from the empty tub, held aloft by some force I wish I didn't know about.
"You need to leave the bathroom, Mr. Jones,"
the voice says. The spirit in front of me is no longer half real. Its ethereal form wrapped in dripping, smoking ichor. It grins, teeth too numerous and torn from its victims. I feel a burden lift from my mind, but the level of control the spirit has over the home is nearly complete. Without a movement, it makes the lights intense enough to scald my eyes. I try to look at it, to see some opening to sprint by, but the blinding glare does nothing but give me a blurred outline. A cold, bone-clawed hand grabs my chin. I hear the spirit's true voice for the first time. It's a horrid, rotting gurgle full of malice and pity. As the mortician talks, I can see dark, wispy tendrils start to form themselves out of cracks in the wall. I squint to try and make out some avenue of escape, but the overworked lights beat my eyes hard enough to sting. They don't want me gone or stopped, just neutered, so I pose no threat to them. They are not of the void or of this world, Oxford. They want this world. As the mortician ends his sentence, I run, grabbing the phone, and he doesn't try to stop me. The only thing to follow me down the hallway is mocking laughter and taunts. There is nowhere to run, Oxford. I stop halfway down the stairs, and judging by the twisted state of the first floor, he's likely right. Walls have doors that were never there before. Old oak things rattling and shaking. Objects fall and hover at random. Grinning, childlike faces crowd the windows. Scenes of violence and murder paid out in flickering snippets like memories desperately trying to be real.
"Go to the living room and take the same path you saw yourself take earlier,"
the voice says. You told me not to watch it, I say, voice shaking, heart threatening to give out.
"And now I'm hoping you ignored me. This isn't some paint-by-numbers summoning, Mr. Jones. It's a fluid situation,"
she chides. I look back and see the mortician slowly sauntering towards me, the walls and floor behind him rotting and corrupting in his wake. I walk, trying to force myself to keep the casual pace I remember from earlier. The hovering images of children plead with me for safety or threaten my soul. Tendrils or hands grasp from open cupboards or cracks in the wall, more and more by the second. The living room is dark and has a sense of subtle dread at odds with the horror carnival the rest of the home is turning into. On the end table beside the old recliner, I see two objects, a remote and an old straight razor. The mortician and all of the symptoms of his haunting slowly follow me. He's right. I have nowhere to run, so they have all the time in the world. As I turn on the television, I hear the last words I would hear from the voice.
"You'll know what to do."
What it displayed as an image so complex and alien, it drove a spike of pain from my eyes to the middle of my brain. But something about that image gives the ghost and his horde pause. I feel a thin smile creep onto my face. I close my eyes, trying to drive out the pain. But as I do so, I can feel something, and I can hear the mortician begin to move forward again. It's not the image. It's me seeing the image. I open my eyes, determined to stare into the screen until this is over, but physically it's not possible. Try as I might, instinct shuts my eyes after a few seconds. But unfortunately, the voice was right. I do know what I need to do. It wasn't quick, or done with any kind of precision, but I scream like a lunatic as I slice away my eyelids, tossing the dead meat aside like an unwanted garnish. The image took my sight, burned itself into my eyes, leaving me blind and wondering if this was all for nothing. "Oh, you'll live long enough to see how much of a mistake this was, Oxford," the mortician said before leaving. All of this was a few months ago. And call me a coward, but I was happy to leave well enough alone. I heard nothing more from the voice or the mortician, and have enough on my plate learning to live life without the use of my eyes. But yesterday, 2 men came to my home. One was in his early 40s, a bit of a sinister vibe to him. The other, young, had the demeanor of an actor, maybe a YouTuber. Their names are Richard and Mateo. They told me they needed my help, that they were unraveling the twisted shit behind what mutilated me, and for that matter, them. I want retribution, but I don't know if going off tilting at windmills makes any sense at this point. So, please, let me know what you guys are thinking. Do you know anything about these guys? This kind of paranormal activity? Who M-Tech is? Any help would be appreciated. My name is Mateo, and if that sounds familiar, unfortunately, this isn't my first time having to post here. Way back when, in internet terms that is, really it's only been a few months or so, I used to be a fairly well-known cursed game streamer. I mean, as well-known as you can be, casting to some of the gloomier spots of the dark web. That is, until a handful of, I want to say, anarchists showed up and decided to start breaking parts of me, thinking I was some kind of dollar store Andre Toulon and in possession of a bunch of killer toys or something. I wasn't. But those idiots managed to rile up one of the dangerous pieces of pasta I had, and all hell broke loose. Cue the man driving the literal 1970s station wagon I'm currently in, Rick. Saved my ass. Probably saved the asses of most people in the surrounding block as well. Took out 3 armed, if not trained psychopaths, letting me get the creepy aspects of things under control. He won't come out and say what his previous job was, but he's a nasty middle-aged guy, scarred in ways that Oxford and myself can't match. Now, after Rick found me, we found Oxford, a thin, balding guy not much older than myself, but with a real old soul vibe. He loves stuff. He even knows how to find the light bulb for an easy-bake oven made in the 1930s in about 15 minutes. And picked up the wrong houseware one day and had the eyes blanched in his skull in an attempt to subdue some evil shit within it. While all 3 of us had our separate standoffs with the supernatural, there was a strange common thread, a cult called the Husk of M, Rick's ghost, the tip-off to my psychos, and the call that got Oxford to start a pissing contest with a poltergeist. They had their hands in all of it. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands of victims of the Husk of M that Rick could have saved, but he had a plan. His part is obvious. No need to delve into it. He's a scary guy who knows scary guys. Me? Beyond being the designated mouthpiece of the group to the World Wide Web, I can get my hands on any kind of cursed, haunted, or anomalous media you can think of, and come from a long line of folks that have been known for the ability to get along with the creepier things on Earth. Oxford. He can get things, just all kinds of things. Tractor parts, homemade bullets, bulk MSG. If it is an object and we need it, he'll have it quicker than eBay. And after a bit of education, seems pretty good hunting down objects of a more esoteric nature. Separate paths to the same destination, one that took us weeks to find the name of and months to finally track down. The Chimera House. The twisted project of the Husk of M, and where their leadership spent the majority of their time. See, the Huskers believe some weird shit. And I know, saying that about a cult seems like the kind of thing you'd do to pass an essay, but I mean, really strange, out there garbage. We live in a world of the supernatural. I was lucky enough to be pretty much born understanding that in some tiny way. Not so much for Rick in Oxford. The Huskers, they've been a cult for a long time. We're talking before the United States, before gunpowder. And if the least likely of our sources is right, before bronze. They knew about the dark side of the world, they understood it and recorded it. And unlike the leave-only footprints policy folks like my parents adopt, they bent those forces and creatures to their will for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Back when they weren't the Husk of M, they went by many names, but they hadn't found the M. But in 1934, that changed. Their philosophy began to revolve around beings they said weren't just paranormal, but things that were beyond all concepts of God we can imagine. Beings that wore bodies like gloves and left entire reality scraped clean of life. Mortal, God, and monster. They began to buy haunted homes and malls. They purchased cursed objects by the truckload and had insane filmmakers recording mind-warping media 24 hours a day. The Husk of M needed all of this haunted errata to somehow hasten the arrival of their gods beyond gods. Now, like all cults, they are extremely full of shit, but in the most dangerous way possible. They've taken segments of haunted buildings, bound them together with cursed masonry, filled it with the most evil objects on Earth, and ensnared the worst entities they could find within its walls. It's been around for decades, and no sign of their gods, but what there is plenty of is innocent corpses and twisted bastards with amused grins. I wish I could say that the plan we came up with was foolproof, but the more we delved into the Chimera House, the more layers and ripples we found. Don't confuse trauma for bravery, though, guys. Each one of us wanted to move on from this, take our lumps and get back to whatever paths were normal in our day-to-day lives. But we couldn't. The soul-crushing knowledge that your life can be turned upside down to this extent by individuals that face no consequences, it was more than we could handle. So, it's into the belly of the beast, or more accurately at the moment, the gates of hell. Come on, man, you've got to tell me something. We're chronicling this so folks can maybe learn here, and they want to know about you. I say to Rick, as we drive down a barren highway in Why Am I Here, Ontario. I was a plumber. The stoic man lies. Was that your hitman name? I say, trying to get a reaction. He smiles. Oh, hitman, listen to you. What do you think, Oxford? I seem like a hitman? No, a slasher villain for sure, Oxford replies. We share a chuckle, and I note the deflection, literally, I guess, as you guys are listening to it right now. Our destination is an abandoned church, staffed by 2 members of the Catholic faith off books enough to have ties with friends of Rick. A plumber knows how to get fake passports, I say, not letting the topic drop. The drive has been long and boring. Just about the only thing I have to do besides give myself an ulcer thinking about what we might find when we get to the Burns Church is troll Rick. Oxford got the square punch for the pictures. Is he a hitman? Rick replies. The conversation for the next 30 minutes or so is a series of minor variations on this line of questioning. Me knowing I'm not getting answers. Rick knowing I won't stop asking. The place is well kept. Only a few windows showing some minor cracks, or hastily replaced panes of glass sitting not quite flush. We pull into the overgrown driveway, weeds thumping on the inner side of our car like the grasping hands of the dead. Not a house, not a shed, not a tree for miles. Just this Gothic-spired tiny church miles outside of the nearest town. A dim light shines in the rectory, our contacts, divine and mundane, doing their best not to attract attention. Though who the hell might be out here spying on a church that hasn't been used since the 90s is beyond me. Rick opens the door. I see 4 men. In the middle are 2 priests. One is tanned, has short black hair and in his mid-20s. The other is ancient, 80s at least, both in full garb, looking nervous and somewhat indignant. That would likely be due to the 2 gentlemen flanking either side of the large oak desk the priests were behind. Rick's contacts. 2 jean-wearing jacket men with half-beards, bikers if I had to guess, and not the CEO on the weekend kind. Smitty, Mouse, long time no see, Rick says, shaking hands and exchanging a large wad of cash from a seemingly endless supply. Weird, damn Rick, all I gotta say, Mouse says. Weird pays the bills, though, Rick replies, clapping the man on the back. We have it covered from here. The 2 men seem more than happy to leave, and I can understand why. This place has an oppressive, almost toxic atmosphere. Some buried impulse in the back of my mind screams at me to run. Rick turns on some lights, walking around, inspecting the small room almost as if he's looking to purchase the place. With the lights on, I can see the younger man has a split lip and a blood stain below his nose. I've never been the most religious guy. Guess it comes with the territory. But seeing the fallout of our little quest for revenge doesn't make me feel good about myself. We sit. An awkward silence shared between everyone but Rick. The young priest starts. Stop right there. What we need from you is the how, not a debate. Rick interrupts. I don't like this at all. I have no delusions that we're going to save the world or anything, but this doesn't seem right. What the hell, Rick? Maybe give the guy a little respect? I blurt out. Rick looks as shocked as I do. You think you're gonna get what we need? You see his face. This guy is stubborn, Rick says. I wave him away and pull my chair forward. The priest looks at me with contempt. I'm Mateo, I say, taking a moment to give Rick a nasty look. I'm Father Summers. My superior is Father Donetto, the young priest says. Guys, personally, I thought this was going to be a bribe situation if I knew we would be beating up priests. Again, I look back toward Rick. If he has shame, he isn't showing it. I'd have found another way of doing things. But we need your help. From what we've been told, you 2 are in charge of something that can point us in the direction we need to go. Nowhere it points do you want to go? The old man says. His accent is thick but nearly impossible to place. Well, we are charged with his thought by some in the church to be none other than Lucifer himself. Me, I don't believe it. And neither do the vast majority of those with knowledge of such things. That being said, it's old, powerful, and vile enough that it does a damn fine impersonation. There are 18 members of our order at the moment. 2 are assigned watch over the hellspawn in this basement. Make of that what you will, Mateo. The young priest is somber. I see knowledge in his eyes and make my insight look like trivia. Sounds like we're dealing with something worse than we've come across, but we don't want to release it. We don't want to do anything, really. We just need to ask it a few questions. We get torn up or possessed down there, then that's on us. And I'm sure Rick can give you guys some compensation for the way he went about things. My reply is level. Rick looks impatient. You are risking more than your lives. I can see it on you three. You've been up against the foot soldiers of Satan, but those of his kingdom with true power, they can take your soul as easily as your life. We heed the warnings as much as you'd assume and are led to the dark red oak door of a basement. The half-dozen locks are black steel, stout and antique-looking. No window, no slot for food. Nothing to indicate this is anything more than a root cellar or workshop. The priests refuse to enter, saying they have to limit their contact with the evil contained within. I try not to think about what that might mean for us. The walls of the room are covered in layers of ancient Bible pages, yellowing, torn, and written in dozens of different languages. The dim ceiling lights are behind inches of lucite engraved with overlapping layers of religious iconography. At one end of the room sits a table with a collection of religious artifacts, scapulars, goblets, silver-lined censers, along with a few objects I'm sure Rick could tell me the use of. At the other, chained to the wall by his arms with massive iron shackles, is a man. If this is who we are led to believe, the pose his imprisonment is forcing on him is, ironically, Christ-like. He wears only a pair of faded, torn dress pants. His skin is deathly pale and marked with cuts, burns, and lesions of all forms. The man's teeth are yellow and black, chipped and cracked. His hair hangs down to the floor, obscuring most of his features, but we can see a slight grin. We shut the door, and the feeling of evil and wrong. That pressure threatening to break our sense of purpose and determination is a physical sensation. I expect Rick to walk right up and start in on whoever this is, but the look on his face is no different from mine. Fear. Pure, basic, instinctual fear. Seems like we have some things to discuss. The man's voice is phlegmatic and pained, but it carries with it a sense of power beyond the frail shell we see in front of us. Rick and Oxford are both stunned, unable to speak. Not to say that I'm feeling particularly brave myself, but it seems I'm the only one able to reply. We do, I say. The sound of flies seems to come from some sourceless spot around the room. And what do you three wise men have to offer me? Blood? Gold? Devotion? These words seem to foul the air. The smell of rot and sulfur becomes choking. I press on. What do you want? I try to take a deep breath to calm myself and wind up nearly doubling over, coughing and gagging. The possessed man slowly raises his head. Greasy, blood-caked hair falling away from his face. He cocks his head to the side at an angle no person could hope to accomplish. You should know what I want. You've been told who I am. The speaking shell of a person replies. I can feel this situation devolving quickly. Whatever the thing in front of me is, its will is starting to worm its way into my mind. If I had a dime for every entity that claimed to be Old Scratch, I would have had a better security system, and I wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. It takes everything in me to blurt this out, but it seems to stop the slow encroachment I feel in my mind. The chained man inhales. His lungs sound about 2 days away from collapse. He seems to contemplate something before speaking. Oh, that explains it. It's been a long time since I've been in the same room as one of your kind. Well, maybe I am he, maybe not, but you feel it, don't you? Even if you are not as enraptured as your friends. This makes me realize something. I look to Rick and Oxford. They stand rigid, slowly turning blue. Before I can ask, the demon says, "Breathe," in a haunting, echoing tone, at odds with the half-dead rattle we've been conversing in. Rick and Oxford fall to their knees, heaving in deep breaths of the foul air. The sheer power of the thing in front of me presses down on me like the weight of the ocean. I get it, but if you have that kind of power, what can we offer you? My tone is level, though I have no idea how. The lives of the two cowards upstairs, comes the blunt reply to my question. But I know that is something you will not give. My freedom would have to be my next offer. Oxford is struggling to stand, but Rick seems to have regained some of his senses. Kid, you're making a literal deal with the devil here, he says between coughs. Oh, does that offend you, Renaud? Do you have issues with the devil? Good to know child killers have their limits, misplaced as they may be. The chained man laughs hysterically, slamming his head against the wall, phlegm and blood dripping from his mouth. Rick, or Renaud, snaps, fear, toxic air, or... No, he draws a pistol aiming it at the chained thing. Missing folks in hell, I take it. He growls to the possessed body. Rick, holy shit, man, put that away. This body could be the only thing keeping whatever is in it in this basement confined. I don't know enough about this, but this isn't a risk to take, I plead. No, pull the trigger, Renaud. Never been something you've had a problem with. So, what will you tell these two? That it was a mistake? Well, one, maybe, a stray bullet. A flame fan in the wrong direction could happen to anyone. But 3, well, Rennie, that isn't a mistake. That's a career choice. The last sentence the chained man says in a deep, otherworldly tone full of threat. Rick's eyes are wide and his hand is shaken. The trigger is half pulled and I brace for the noise of the gun going off. We both get what you were and what you may have done, Oxford says. You know what he's doing. This seems to get through to Rick. He lowers the pistol, body trembling with rage and fear. Oxford, that is some chutzpah you're showing. What exactly is it you think I'm doing? The creature looks to the blind man, staring into eyes that can't return the favor. The direct attention from the demon strips Oxford of his bravado. Typical entity head games is what he'd say if you'd let him win, I interject. The chained evil pays me no mind. Renard's shame was historical, but you, Oxford, your shame, it's potential. It hasn't happened, but it will. The thing is clearly enjoying this. Oxford stays silent. I can't tell if he's frozen or staring down the half-rotten shell, but either way, he has my respect. The four of us are silent. We can feel this pact or deal balancing on a razor's edge, one side having nothing to lose, the other having the ability to take everything. There's a noise from upstairs, splintering wood, breaking glass maybe. A low, dark laugh from the bound evil. Oh, no, Matteo. I'm not one of your pasta. I don't have to leech fear and confusion to exist. I have no need for head games. Think horses, not zebra. Some of me may be here, bound to this crumbling shell of a man, but I still see. I still know. I just needed a little time to solidify my bargaining position. Oxford, your friend, has been following the three of you for a long time. And in about 4 minutes or so, we will be walking into this room. Those false crusaders upstairs won't be able to put up much of a fight. You have about that long to decide how much you are willing to help me. One chain is my final offer. To you, they are nothing more than iron. I eventually release myself by my own hand, stop that malnourished relative of mine, and give you the location of the windmill you want so badly. Everyone wins. For a moment, as the demon talks, I see it. Just a flash, the true face of what we are dealing with. Screams, echoing laughter, and wet spraying sounds from upstairs. A sourceless wind begins to pick up as Bible pages begin to fall from the wall. Several seem to drift over, and texts beginning to form in sick red lettering on their blank backs. The air is charged with impending evil. The little I know of words like this tells me they're beginning to fail. Tick, tock, boys. Once that door opens, I'll have a much more accommodating business partner. The chained man begins to crawl slowly up the wall, no force of nature propelling his journey. He perches halfway up, spider-like, lording down upon us as the contract hovers on a bone-reeking updraft. Oxford begins to feel along the walls, disoriented. I can't make a decision. Rick stands with pistol drawn, looking between the demon and the door. Our blind friend grabs the ankle of the demon, like a penitent begging for salvation. I'll do it. You win, he says, looking up at the perched entity. I try and tell him he can't even read the contract, but as a long black quill appears in his hand, and the rising storm of ethereal force begins to subside, I feel the deal has already been made. Oxford scrawls a signature in the middle of a page as the chained shell slides down the wall. Deftly, Oxford produces a small multi-tool. He fumbles around the lesion-dotted arm of the possessed man till he finds the shackle. Something is walking down the stairs, footsteps heavy as gunshots. Oxford flips out a small, stout awl and begins to work it under the head of the bolt sealing the cuff. The thing coming down the stairs hums a tune that makes me think of tumbleweeds and cowboys. Rust flakes from the decades-old bolt, but quarter-inch by quarter-inch the blind auctioneer moves it, until finally it hits the ground. Its ringing seems to go on much longer than it should in the small, cramped room. The chained thing flexes its free arm, grabbing Oxford's hand. It slowly leans in. "Thank you," it says, as the stout, safe-like door is ripped off of its hinges. All three of us move to the far side of the room, leaving a clear path between what may be the King of Lies and the Mortician. The thing in the doorway could not be mistaken for a man, despite the relative similarity in size and shape. It has waxen skin like turned lard, clawed gray nails and deep blue eyes, broken by bits of white like passing clouds. It wore a short-brimmed black hat and waistcoat, but these ink-black items seemed just as much a part of its body as its flesh and bone. It points a gore-soaked hand at Oxford and is about to speak when a force, direct and unimpeded, grabs it, dragging it over to the chained demon. The Mortician is confused, powerless, bound to the physical realm and in the sights of something with ethereal power. Pieces begin to break free from the sky-eyed entity. Its face is shock, pain, and surprise. And strangely, Oxford is the first to run. I'd have assumed he'd have wanted to be around when the thing that lost him his sight was taken out. Before I follow suit, I make a moment of eye contact with the chained thing. There is a look of joy in its eyes that seems off. Not that I spend too much time pondering this. Rick and myself quickly catch up to Oxford and help guide the man as far away from whatever we helped to unleash as possible. The first floor is a charnel house. The walls are splattered with gore. The room is a torn-apart pile of splinters, plaster, and glass. The two priests hang from the ceiling, opened like mail and left hanging, empty, eyeless, and with what is left of their faces twisted in eternal agony. Oxford gives us the location of the Chimera House as we begin to pull away. But for the next hour or so, as we make our way back to the States, the massive sedan is silent. I was in a private military for a while, Rick starts. The night is late, but we have no intentions of stopping. And the best way to put it is that it was a lateral damn career move. Man, don't worry about it. That thing was just screwing with us, I reply. Probably, but you deserve to know who you're bunked with. It was full of psychopaths, idiots, and kids. And I had the misfortune of having 3 people under me who fit all 3 categories. 3 18-year-old hotheads, full of conspiracy theory rage, and the kind of heartlessness that comes with being that young and told to kill. Rules of war, with suggestions to groups like us. But most of the people there were ex-military, and we had some hard lines we wouldn't cross. Not these kids. One day, the leadership decided they were more trouble than they were worth, and taking care of the problem fell to me. It needed to be done, but it ain't something I'm proud of. In other circumstances, it could have been given a dishonorable discharge and a prison sentence. It maybe changed a couple of decades down the road. But that wasn't in the cards. Rick isn't much for eye contact, but the look of loss and regret he gives me nearly has the weight of the room we escaped. 3 days of straight travel, sleeping in the oversized car and running through our plan, held together with duct tape and hope as it is. We barely have time to eat or sleep. The Chimera House is in a constant state of flux, the density of paranormal energy making its very location an ever-changing thing. And we sure as hell, pun half intended, have no plans of going back to that basement to ask where it moved to. So, I guess now would be a good time to go over the plan. I've been talking about it enough. We've boiled the situation down to 3 problems: people, spirits, and effect. We quickly figured out that trying to completely shut down the husk of M, or even the Chimera House itself, wasn't going to happen. But that isn't our plan. Our goal is to throw a wrench into the works, make a bunch of noise, and get the husk of M out of the shadows. I have no contacts, but I do know there are people out there whose whole lives are devoted to combating things like this. We can't take the Huskers down, but maybe they could. With this in mind, Rick is confident that he can get us in the door one way or the other. While the cult has plenty of people, they can't exactly hire much professional security. As far as the spirits, I can't say I've got it covered, but I do have an idea. Garbage. Supernatural garbage, mind you, but yes, my contribution revolves around trash. The forces that keep the place going are being carefully cultivated and monitored, kept at a balance to do whatever their crazy plans involve, without spiraling out of control and turned into a Lovecraftian train wreck. I have a suitcase full of half-broken, expired, and otherwise unpredictable pasta Oxford has helped me collect as we've been taking our road trip. If my theory holds, they should be enough to throw the supernatural homeostasis of the place off balance. For a little while, at least. We offered to let Oxford sit the footwork out, but he said he'd had none of it, wanted to help us see this through. We sit in a scrummy motel, off the beaten path, and knowing tomorrow has a high likelihood of being our last day on Earth. You think we're pulling this off? I ask Rick, as I stare at the stained, cracked ceiling. We stared down the devil. How hard could this be? He replies with a chuckle. That wasn't the devil, I say, trying to keep my mind on anything but tomorrow's events. Probably, right? Rick is loading several revolvers with varying types of ammunition. But it was something, though. And who knows if we're gonna see the worst tomorrow. This ain't a suicide mission. I need you two to remember that. We go in till the momentum dies out, and we get the hell out double time. We've got 4 good hands between us. 1 blind guy, and a plan that is cat scratch at best. His concern is actually kind of touching. The fact that those pistols are for living, breathing people, though, brings me back to reality. Did he seem scared to you guys? Oxford says, a bit off topic. The devil? No, he seemed pretty happy to me, I say, shaking my head. Go on, Rick tells him, looking intrigued. Not of us, but of something. Oxford lights up a small cigar as he speaks. If he didn't want us going here, do you really think he would have offered us help? We're talking about a demon at the very least. Maybe I'm wrong, but if something like that is worrying about them... I can't tell if it's too on the nose or absolute genius. But I guess being October, the idea to disguise a haunted location as a spooky attraction must have been pretty obvious. It's 11 at night, and we're waiting on a dark country road, watching for the last of the customers to filter out, wondering how many bought themselves one-way tickets. Most of the people outside are just locals, know nothing about the crazy shit, so we can't go in hard, Rick says, checking the action on one of his many firearms. I hold the small, snub-nosed revolver he gave me in my lap. Its weight metaphorical more than literal. A half hour after the last bored parent has wandered away from the hell-mouth mass as an attraction, Rick, Oxford, and myself begin to make our way through the forest and brush to the front gate. We are within eyesight of the gate, Rick crouching low and keeping ahead of Oxford and myself. As we hunker down and wait, something, other than the obvious, seems strange. Oxford, get your hand on my shoulder. We might need to bolt pretty quick, I whisper. Why? Afraid it'll be too dark and I'll trip on something? His answer seems logical enough. Rick gets behind the young man closing up the cheap plexiglass ticket booth. There's a large knife and a quick conversation. Rick waves us over as we get there and we see the panicked young guy zip-tied on the floor of the booth. This guy and 2 others, they're on their way home. We've got about 45 minutes before anyone notices something's wrong, Rick whispers. He then points to the cheap plywood front to the Chimera House. We have the keys. Anyone we don't want to run into is somewhere inside. Though I'm guessing that part. Kid here says bosses show up at random. It's go time. We take a collective breath and make our way over the packed dirt to the roadway. The shell around the Chimera House was your typical small-town type of haunt. Dangling bats, motor-driven sheet ghosts, and pun-related graves surrounded us. This cobbled-together veneer gives me courage. I open the door and step through, followed by the other 2 unlucky bastards with me. Click. Don't move an inch, Rick yells frantically. The cheap door behind us closes, and I wonder what Rick is talking about as I try to follow his advice. I feel something under my shoe, hard, almost like a small stone, but with a slight give. We hear speaker static begin to hum. All around us is UV-painted faces, cotton cobwebs, and fake skeletons. You're standing on a landmine, Rick says, slowly, masking deep rage. They saw us coming.
So glad you 3 could make it. Though we have been thinking you'd show up sooner.
The voice from overhead is distorted, the speakers cheap and old. I can tell Rick knows the voice. His eyes widen and dart around.
Put all your little totems, fetishes, and toys into the bin to your left, if you will.
I look around and see a Halloween-themed garbage container. I make eye contact with Rick to try and see if he has a better idea, but he simply nods. As I drop my backpack full of supernatural errata, I notice that the can is attached to a chute, and any hope of retrieving the collection is dashed as the bag falls out of sight.
"You too, Rick?"
the voice says, and Rick tosses a half a dozen non-legal firearms down the same way. I suddenly feel naked, trapped. Rick grabs a multi-tool from Oxford, kneels, and begins to fiddle with some mechanism in the trap below me. "Step off slowly," he says. I do, and feel my heart start beating again as I step off of the mine.
"Inventive as expected. So, you three want to experience our life's work? The epitome of what we are on this earth for? We are more than happy to oblige."
The smug tone drives home that feeling of small and vulnerable. "By the sound of your voice, we know each other, don't we? I'll do jumping jacks on this bouncing Betty here long before I let myself be another snack for your pets," Rick says defiantly.
Richard, my friend, you know where this conversation goes, right? But maybe your friends need a little explanation. All three of you have people you care about. You try and run or opt out, we find you, we stop you. Then we make you watch as we throw them through things and places that will make the Chimera House seem tame. The house needs sustenance, and you three with your little struggles and angry spirits and little gods, you are ripe fruit indeed. Make it out, and our pact is over. Or we do it the hard way."
As the voice speaks, I think of an aspect of this that hasn't quite dawned on me. I assumed I'd be taking my life in my hands, and as much as I intend to get out of this intact, it was a risk I was willing to take. But the thought of my friends and family being put through this kind of hell because of my pissing contest takes a lot of the righteous out of my quest to get even. I hope one of us has some kind of last-minute plan, but as the silence begins to stretch out, it becomes obvious we are at the mercy of the cult.
"The house starts at the doors to the dining room. Best of luck."
With a squeal, the speakers cut out, leaving our three unwise men staring at the double doors to our fate. There's a sense of vertigo as we open them. The inside is not a family-friendly creeping dining room, but an old, disused hotel lobby. If I had to guess, last time it was active was somewhere in the 90s. We hear the door behind us close, and when we look, it's nothing more than an unbroken wall covered by faded neon wallpaper. I run my head through a few of the more well-known options of where we could be. While not my forte personally, I've always had an interest in other kinds of paranormal activity. Unfortunately, haunted hotels, real or fake, are a dime a dozen. Even just narrowing down the list to what I know in the obvious time frame still gives me 20 or so options. We feel like we're being watched. Scratching noises and whispers seem to be around every corner. Movement at the very edge of vision has us stopping dead more than once. Every sign, every pamphlet, every possible indication as to the name of the hotel has been purposefully defaced. We try leaving. The doors to the lobby are immobile. "Oh, shit," I say, as something dawns on me. I walk to one of the small, cramped elevators, and the panel has 3 buttons, their descriptions obscured by decades of grime and dust. I begin to scrub with a shirt sleeve, The first two are nothing more than numbers. I see the third, though, and my heart starts to hammer in my chest. "What?" Rick says impatiently. "It's called the Starcade, and it's like an urban legend. See, pasta, it's fairly harmless because the entities themselves are usually very limited in what they can do. But they tend to be more lucid, reasonable. Spirits are usually nothing to worry about because they can do a lot of reality-bending crap, but their minds are frayed and shattered. This place, it's both. Overnight stay Halloween 1988. News reports said a carbon monoxide leak, but locals always thought it was something else. 20 kids hurt. 12 didn't make it. The hotel owner didn't have the concept of taste, and the place kept going. Over the years, it had more than its share of tragedy. 2 assaults that got out of hand, and a handful of tertiary connections to very bad people. The hotel shut down, and with it the arcade. But after that, if you believe certain folks, it'd pop up. A random button on a random elevator in a random hotel looking for new kids. It's a haunted place with a strong will of its own, and direction. Judging by the look on Rick's face, he doesn't understand how bad this is. Well, you got half of it covered at least, right? It's not like that. This is no man's land. This is the kind of thing that people in my circles don't talk about openly because it shows how little we actually know. And this is one of what these psychopaths have put us through. I'm close to a breakdown. Rick makes eye contact, nods, and pushes the button. The 3 of us barely fit in the tiny elevator, and the ride goes on much longer than is needed. The outside of the lift is full of strange howling noises and sounds that are just 1 or 2 steps off of conversation. The doors open into a sprawling, backlit cavern, the sparse arcade machines, and tables spread as thinly as toppings on a cheap pizza. Figures, wispy and thin, step into existence for a moment, childlike faces scowling at us before dissolving into the stale sweat and junk food-scented air. Lights flicker, creating beacons in the darkness. Cigarette smoke hangs thick and stale, catching the illumination, giving the arcade machines an almost lighthouse-like appearance. Far in the distance, we see an exit sign. The place feels crowded, as if we are forever on the verge of bumping into someone. But other than the transparent faces peeking at us from behind cabinets, or under lopsided tables, we see no one else. "The other side of the mirror," Rick says as we walk. "What?" I reply, ignoring the feeling of a hand on my shoulder. It's what this place reminds me of. When the cult had me, the place they kept me, it didn't feel like it was where everything was originating. But at the end, that spirit, it had me there. That place behind the mirror. It felt like it owned that space, that it was made of its wants and desires. Rick shivers as he talks. We pass the same table, with the same selection of half-eaten popcorn and pizza on it 3 times before I mention it. We are in the dim light of a Frogger cabinet, and we can hear the sounds of laughter at the edge of the glow. The floor feels tarry. I brace myself to run, and feel the need to keep repositioning my feet. The massive cavern begins to feel claustrophobic. I hear distant laughter, and behind it, a shuffling, wet noise and coughing, far away but getting closer. The shadows deepen. Soon, ours is the only machine lit. We can see the exit sign, but nothing else. Out of the gloom and the unknown comes a small boy. His face is nearly blue, his eyes red-veined and swollen. He looks to be around 10. He wears a pair of smoldering pajamas and stares blankly towards me. I catch glimpses of things in the shadows, amalgams of the human soul, rage, and confusion. I take off the rose-colored glasses I've been wearing my entire life and understand the effects of being bound on the only eternal part of a human being. This mass of life force and emotion, it's not an interesting phenomenon, it's a tragedy, spawned from a tragedy, with no other purpose than to cause more tragedy. I understand. The child points. Behind me, Rick is lifted in the air, a long waxen hand snaking from the screen of the machine behind us, flickering blue, gripping him by the neck. And then I see it. The twisted brutality of nature showing itself even beyond the veil of life and death. The mass. Those are the victims, minds barely holding on, trying to warn others. The machines. Those only sources of light in the dark. That is where the true evil is, where all of the hate and rage of the amalgam distilled. Rick draws a hold-out pistol and fires into the hand. For a moment it sags. I get ready to grab the man, but the machine cracks and a second hand grabs him around the shoulder. There's a sound of cracking bone and Rick screams. All around us, I can hear rattling wood, creaking glass, and my mind pictures what types of things are crawling their way from the rest of the machines. "Run," Rick says, barely able to produce the words. We do. The sounds behind us turn into a cacophony of remixed souls hating and loving the torture they are inflicting in equal measure. The room we find ourselves in when we shut the door on our first casualty is normal at first glance. A living room. Judging by decor, I'd say late 70s. Any hope of going back for Rick or him catching up to us is dashed as we see the wall behind us again. Is door free? "Any idea where we are?" Oxford asks. My mind is too busy trying to process the death I just witnessed to reply. I look around and try and see if I can figure anything out. To me, it looks like any other place in the 70s. We sit on overstuffed couches, orange and brown out-of-date fabric, a bit worn but in good shape. We didn't see it appear, but we both agreed that one moment the brass-trimmed oak Ouija board wasn't there, and then it was. I wanted to laugh at the on-the-nose nature, but my gallows humor dried up right about when the only guy who knew what he was doing got torn apart. The lights dim of their own accord, and as we touch the planchette, we can both feel it, a twitching, tugging movement. A door rattles somewhere in the home. The heavy board rotates slightly. How do we leave? I ask. The only question I can think of that matters. The lights begin to flicker. A porcelain bird falls from a shelf, shattering on the ground. The planchette moves, slowly at first, but gaining speed like a disused engine. Oxford, it spells. I try a different question. Why are we here? This time, it speeds from letter to letter. Oxford is still its reply. "This thing is just screwing with us, and maybe we should just look for an exit," Oxford says, getting up. That nagging feeling is back. I ask one more question. How can Oxford help? As I do, the man takes a stumble worthy of a viral video, the table spills, and I have to catch him before he cracks his head open on the arm of the couch. "What the hell?" I say, trying to untangle myself from him. Oxford stands, getting his bearings. "Blind, new room, it happens." The house has a dark energy, and each corner seems to hide a leering grin or unseen scratching. We try every door and window until we hit the master bedroom. What we see in there, I won't describe. It was a window into a place no human being was meant to see. The nexus of this place, the balancing point for every thumb in the eye to reality the husk of M has collected. The things I saw, what I witnessed, looking into a peephole God himself would prefer to avoid. They caused physical pain. I felt as if I'd lost something by viewing them. How long? I say, as I understand the situation. Beautiful, isn't it? Oxford replies, and right after the handshake. If it helps, your friend wanted nothing more than what I offered. Enough power to exact his revenge and enough time to enjoy it. I turn away from my soul-tearing nexus, and one of the doors downstairs breaks open. Cult members in blue tracksuits, some carrying rifles, others carrying holy books and artifacts, begin to enter the house. Can you tell me why? I ask the thing wearing my dead friend's skin. Times are changing, Mateo. The rules are changing. And while these little piss ants aren't right, they are closer than I'd like to admit. I want this for myself. If there's no way to stop the storm, I want to be the first thing to have an umbrella. The bean-wearing Oxford reaches out, touching the vortex. His hand comes back, shifting and dripping like wax. I'm indignant but worn out. Oxford is possessed and gone. One more question before I get killed. You aren't him, though, are you? He's hiding. And you are a red herring he sends out to try and stop folks from looking. I'd guess just about every major religion has a devil in a basement somewhere thinking they are keeping the world safe. Am I right? He smiles, almost proud, the skin of his face beginning to twist and warp into something stretched and angular, and human. Very close, Mateo. Close enough that, if I were you, I'd worry about what it means when the devil is on the run. You live today, but let that knowledge hang as an albatross around your neck. Let that lodestone be your punishment. Some things men are not meant to know. As he says this, the thing wearing Oxford grabs me, tossing me into the vortex. Time seems to slow down, and I can feel the touch of thousands of bound souls within the house. Then something greater. The pure will, ancient and evil of the demon trying to wrest control of the place. When I found myself stumbling out of a back door of the Chimera House, I ran, as fast as I could, back to the wood-paneled car, unimpressively flooring it as far away as I could. Kitted out with fake passports and a decent amount of cash, getting some distance and setting myself up wasn't all that hard. What is hard is living each day knowing what I know. Knowing that the fight between good and evil is the tip of an iceberg that we will never know anything about, but is intrinsically tied to the fate of every person on Earth. Don't know what to say, really. Happy Halloween, I guess?